from the Institute for the Advancement of Cognitive Education. This is Powerful Podcasts, conversations with scholars, authors, and professionals, cutting-edge resources, helping you to enhance better thinking and learning. Welcome, and today we've got Professor Mary Grosser. She is an extraordinary professor in cognitive development and critical thinking development at the Northwest University in South Africa. She's also advisory board member of the Institute for the Advancement of Cognitive Education. Very welcome, Professor Grosser.
Thank you very much.
I think the first question is, what does the term cognitive education mean?
Well, to really put it in a nutshell, I think first of all, it implies that one needs to develop thinking processes, and that includes cognitive and metacognitive processes in learners to help them to become independent and self-regulated learners in terms of their schoolwork. But not only in terms of their schoolwork, good and strong cognitive processes also enable learners to be better equipped to solve problems and make good decisions as part of daily life. And secondly, I think cognitive education also implies that learners need to be taught to understand how their own minds work. So that in a nutshell to me is what cognitive education would entail.
Now, I think for many of our listeners, the term cognitive education might be foreign, or it might be a very abstract concept. Can you maybe explain what are the basic cognitive processes, those basic thinking processes that entail cognitive education?
Yes, I think the word cognitive might be a bit strange to people, but it actually refers to thinking. Cognition means thinking. So if one speaks about basic thinking competencies that learners need to acquire, I would like to put them into three groups. First of all, there are the lower order competencies, which are the easy skills, as I can put it in that manner. And that refers to things like paying attention to information, for example. So it's important that a learner stays alert and conscious during the learning process. And one needs to teach learners skills to become attentive of when they are involved in learning. Secondly, a lower order competency is to perceive information. And by that I mean a learner needs to know that he needs to use all his senses during learning. It's not just for seeing or listening. It's encompassing all the senses to become aware of information that is presented. And the third lower order competency that I want to mention is memorizing. Storing information for later retrieval. Those are basic lower order thinking processes that all learners need to acquire. The second group I want to refer to are the higher order competencies. The more difficult thinking skills, in simple terms, if one can call it like that. Now, with that I mean that very often learning requires more challenging processes to make sense of information. For example, comparing information, classifying information, analyzing information, or thinking critically about information. That definitely does not only rely on memorizing or paying attention. So it's much more difficult skills that learners need to apply. The third group of competencies that I think we often neglect is the feelings or the attitudes or the dispositions. And with that I refer to things like willingness, being willing to be involved in learning, being motivated, having self-confidence about my learning. And there are numerous dispositions that I can mention, a lengthy list, being responsible, being accountable for my learning, positive attitudes towards learning. And if one really can summarize the three groups that I've mentioned, the lower order, the higher order, and then the skills and the dispositions, I think one gets to main focus areas, and that is then skills that can be linked to the brain, to the mind, to the head, and then skills that involve the heart or the emotions. So that in short would entail the basic thinking competencies for me.
Thank you very much. And am I correct to say that one is not more important than the others, but all of them are integrated with one another, and then collectively they form a whole?
They definitely collectively. It's not either or. They all need to function in an integrated manner. Yes.
A lot of people oftentimes stumble upon the concept of metacognition, and then they ask questions: what is the difference between cognition and metacognition? What would you say is the difference between metacognition and cognition?
Well, cognition, every day we think about things. So any process that we engage in, for example, making decisions, solving problems, interpreting information, or even responding to a question like I'm doing now, that involves cognitive processes. But it's also important that when I am involved in a cognitive process like answering a question or solving a problem or making a decision, that I need to reflect very carefully about my answer or the decision that I'm making. And that is a metacognitive process, to really examine my own thinking and to make sure that what I'm saying or that what I'm deciding is effective, or is it correct? Is it meaningful? Is it significant? So making sure about my thinking, in simple English, evaluating my own thinking, assessing my own thinking for meaningfulness, for logical thinking, for significance, that to me is metacognition. So not only doing the act of thinking, but also examining, is my act correct? Does it make sense? Or do I have to change it? And that is why it's then important also that a learner has strategies to examine his own thinking. Not just to stop and say, well, I've made the decision, I've solved the problem, but also sit back and say, okay, let me reflect. How did I do this? Is it correct? Is it effective? Is it meaningful? So that to me is metacognition.
So, and in both cases, in cognition and metacognition, one can learn specific skills to enhance both processes.
Definitely so. Learners will not automatically apply metacognition if we do not intentionally teach them how to go about that.
And so I guess the question for most parents and teachers or practitioners is, how do we do that? And so I read in some of your material that you speak about the difference between teaching for, teaching of, and teaching about thinking. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, definitely so. So all three of them are extremely important when we speak about cognitive education. So whenever I want to teach a learner how to think better, that's cognitive education. I want them to become better thinkers so that their learning and their everyday life and decision making becomes more effective. I need to teach for thinking, first of all, and that means that I have to create conditions, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's at home, and parents should not think that it cannot be done at home. I need to create conditions for learners where I intentionally support the development of thinking and make time for learners to apply thinking. So in the classroom, for example, teachers would explicitly teach them how to, for example, pay better attention, or how to make a better analysis of information, or how to apply critical thinking to information. But a parent at home, for example, let's say we are sitting at the dinner table, and I ask my child, okay, tell me about your day. What was good about your day? What was bad about the day? That is, in a simple way, teaching them to be critical about what happened during their school days. So it's making that time for engaging with thinking processes. That's the teaching for thinking. Teaching of thinking. There I specifically model and demonstrate specific skills to learners. So if I want a learner to analyze, I don't just tell them, okay, analyze the information. I have to model analysis as a skill to my learner. Or I have to model making comparisons to a learner. And I think that we often forget. Teachers often tell learners, okay, go home and compare these two aspects for me, without giving guidance or a demonstration. So the art of thinking is really explicitly demonstrating and modeling, mediating how to apply a specific skill.
Right.
The teaching about thinking involves the metacognitive part. And that is where I specifically teach them how to assess their own thinking. Again, modeling, mediating, how to do that, how to self-correct your own thinking.
Professor Grosser, thank you very much. You have also written a book or edited a book on critical thinking. Why would you say is it important for parents, educators, and practitioners to develop better thinking and learning in today's time?
Well, we are preparing and educating our learners to cope with challenges of the 21st century. And if one looks at these challenges that the 21st century pose to our learners, it involves a number of things. One needs to prepare learners to cope with academic challenges in the first place. But then there are also personal and life challenges and societal and global challenges that we are faced with in the 21st century. And for all these challenges, learners need well-developed skills. If I can just mention a few, a 21st century learner needs to be a good communicator. He needs to be a problem solver. He needs to be a critical thinker. He needs to be a collaborator. He needs to be information and media literate. He needs to be a self-directed learner. He needs to be globally aware and civically engaged. And in all those roles are hidden a number of thinking skills as well as dispositions. I mean, if you are a collaborator, it implies that you are working with other people. And there are a number of important attitudes and dispositions that I've mentioned earlier as part of the basic competencies that learners need to acquire. They all come into play then. So that is the first reason that I would say. It's the whole 21st century setup and the skills that learners need to deal with the challenges that they will be faced with. A second aspect that I need to clarify or that I think is very important is that learners need to be prepared to deal with the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, if one looks at grade 1 learners in 2019, these learners will be in grade 12 in 2030, if I'm correct. I don't know if my mathematics is correct now. And we do not even know what the world will look like then. So it's totally unpredictable. So we cannot prepare learners specifically for something. We need to prepare learners to be able to do anything. And for that purpose, a wide variety of skills and dispositions, I think, is our better option. Specifically for them to understand and to cope with a digitally focused life. How to interact with digital media, which will be their reality by then. And if I can and make it easy, digestible, I think one can get 4 main clusters of skills that learners will need to have to function properly in the 21st century and then to cope with the fourth industrial revolution. And that would be thinking skills, that cannot, by the way, be taught by computers. Therefore, teachers and parents will always remain crucial to teach critical thinking, to teach problem solving, to teach decision making. Personal skills, and under that I cluster the dispositions and attitudes, which also cannot be taught by computers. Things like motivation, communication, responsibility, reliability, empathy. Then there's a group called digital skills, which I think is extremely important. Learners need to become digitally literate, learn coding, learn online learning, how to cope in an online learning environment. And then the fourth group, I think, is job-specific skills, industry knowledge, workplace technology, and technical skills that will play a crucial role. So in that sense, the two main issues, I think, that necessitate critical thinking and normal thinking development is the 21st century challenges as well as the fourth industrial revolution challenges.
Well, thank you so much. I think those are very important points that you have raised. Oftentimes, parents and teachers and practitioners ask for practical tips, action steps that they can take to enhance better thinking and learning. Now, your book is available on the ERSA website, and our listeners can go there to purchase your book. But what would be some action steps, some practical tips that you can give to the listeners to develop better thinking and better learning?
I have three things in mind, and the first one, I think teachers and parents should acknowledge that developing thinking must be intentional. We need to make time for it. And if we don't make time for it, we can forget that better thinking will develop. It has to become part and parcel of daily living, not only at school, but in our homes as well. So talking to our children, asking them questions that would elicit thinking from them. So the intentional part to me is very important. Then secondly, I think teachers, practitioners and parents should take hands. And what we do in the classroom should actually be reinforced at home. So if I deal with a certain cognitive or thinking process in school, it's important that that process is reinforced at home. So I think there's a lot of cooperation between teachers and parents and practitioners that need to take place for really strong thinking development to exist. And then finally, I think it's very important that we become knowledgeable about different tools. How do we develop these skills? It will require some training, and I think there is our website, the IACE website, will provide a lot of guidance to teachers and parents in future about what are the tools that we can employ at home or in our classrooms to help our learners become better thinkers.
Professor Grosser, thank you so much for your time. Our guest today was Professor Mary Grosser, Extraordinary Professor in Cognitive Development and Critical Thinking Development at the Northwest University in South Africa. Today she spoke about the basic principles of cognitive education. In summary, here are 3 action steps that you can apply. Number 1, next time you sit around the dinner table or drive in the car, help your child to reflect on a specific experience. Ask her what was good, what was challenging, how was this experience different from another experience. Secondly, next time you look at your children's school books or listen to them about what they have learned in the classroom, think how you can link what they are learning to objects and experiences from everyday life. Ask, where else do we or other people use this in real life? Try to integrate school and home. Number 3, sign up for free membership and visit our website to find tools that will help you to ask the right kind of questions. Questions that will help you to develop better thinking and learning. This podcast is produced by the Institute for the Advancement of Cognitive Education. Find us online at www.ilearnthinking.org or on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at iLearnThinking.